Actually, scratch all that. Percy Brown or Jason Momoa.
Percy Brown.
Now that's what I'm talking about.
All day.
James Gunn. You heard it out his mouth. Let's go. They say in order to beat a man, you have to beat the man. But of course, I am the most charismatic man. Welcome to the most overrated, underappreciated, most viewed, underviewed podcast of all time. Welcome to the Prince of Fresh Air. I'm, of course, your host, the most charismatic man. Beat that, Joe Rogan, #1 podcast coming soon. But, before we, I bring on my guests and we have a great conversation, let me just start off by saying this. I want to give my thoughts and prayers and condolences to anybody in LA who are suffering through this awful tragedy, these fires. A lot of my friends, I know a lot of them suffered losses, and people lost their homes, their livelihood, belongings, and their life. So I want to give my thoughts and prayers out to that community. And let's make sure 2025 is the year of not only just overcoming these type of tragedies, but also being able to rebuild and overcome these tragedies. So, let's get the pleasantries over with. Like, let me introduce my next guest, because he's not just an average Joe. He's a successful man in his own right. Who is he? Well, no need to fear, because the most charismatic man is here. All right. So let me give you a tale of the tape. He is a journalist for the Collider. He's a screenwriter, included in a sci-fi adventure film, The White Raven. He's a producer, and he's also the radio host show of the Shuman Show. He's an amazing, talented man. I'm glad I was able to connect with him. He's been, killing it. He's been doing it for multiple years, very successful in the entertainment industry. Please help me introduce Kris Shuman to the show.
No, I'm just kidding. What's up, man? Thanks for having me on, Percy. I appreciate it, man. I always like to have an opportunity just to sit back and rap with normal people, man. And I think that you and I are going to connect in a way that I just connect with other people, man. And you have that talent too. And I it's a privilege to be here, man. So
yeah, it's two podcast giants collided and making magic. So people, enough about me, because everybody knows me at this point. Let's talk about you, right? Because you're, like I said, you're successful. You have your own thing going on, and usually I start off by saying, how did you get involved in this business? But I'm gonna switch it up a little bit. I want to go away from the script. The Shuman Show. Let's talk about that. Let's dive into that.
Yeah.
What is the Shuman Show for people who don't know, and maybe people who do know? Just go about, how did you start the Shuman Show?
That's a great question, man. Like, and thank you for all the accolades and for pumping me up, man. I appreciate it. So life wasn't always great, right? And while I'm in a position now where I've been fortunate enough to be blessed and to success, man, like it wasn't always that way for me. And last year we started with a podcast, a simple podcast aimed at giving back to the community around me, right? I think I'm getting a little blurry here or something. I'm not sure what's going on.
It's TMZ. Don't worry about it. They always start
okay. If it gets blurry, that means I'm exposing too much. Anyway, so yeah, man, I started this recovery-based podcast in an effort to give back some of what was given to me. Okay. In other words, I have a fantastic life today because of the past that I used to have, and my past doesn't define me. It helps me grind forward into becoming who I'm meant to be. And I wanted to share that with some people. And of course, the heart and soul of that is let's see how we can be helpful to others. Nice. As it turned out, man, that journey was really more about me learning about who I was underneath. And I didn't realize it was going to be that way. So the Shuman Show is no different. It's a journey of my own identity. It's an understanding of who I am. And listen, I'm an interesting person. You're an interesting person. And what the Shuman Show is going to do the best is going to be a place where interesting people can come together and form a community of interesting people that want to know interesting things. Some of our guests that we have coming up, we have some neuroscientists, we have, spokespersons, stunt people, a whole bevy of guests. But the things that are interesting to me, for instance, just an example, right? I'm a believer, right? I think that God exists and he loves us all. And one of the things that I'd like to know, though, from a neuroscience standpoint, just a question, just to kind of preview, right? A little sneak peek. What happens within the brain from a neuroscience standpoint when a person says that they believe in God? Because once you see millions of people that say they believe in God and they start living this fantastic journey that propels them forward into places of success, whatever success means for them, you have to begin to wonder, like, what is really going on? So that's just kind of a brief kind of mention of what the interesting type topics that we'll be exploring will be.
Well, interesting. I love that. I think podcasts right nowadays, everybody got one, right? And it's like, and I say that with all respect, because I think podcasts have made a name for itself in the industry. It took a while for podcasts to catch on, and I think
Yeah.
without the pandemic, I wouldn't have created this. And you've been doing your show for a while. And how did you get involved in creating something like that? Because, like I said, you're a screenwriter. I know you do voiceover work. You're
Mhm.
also an activist and a public speaker. How did you come up with the concept of the show? Was it maybe a moment in life that it happened, or was it just an idea that you had that finally came to fruition?
Yeah, it just kind of happened. Like, I wish I could give you some. I was listening to a thing today, and they were saying that lie of having that inspiring eureka moment of creativity is really detrimental to people, and that didn't happen to me either. This was born over years of turmoil, years of struggle, and then also years of triumph. Right. Like I said, man, my past. If I was to go into it deeply, I've experienced homelessness, addiction, alcoholism, the whole nine yards, and to be able to come back and overcome from that is only part of the journey that is required of me as a spiritual human being. The other part, of course, is to be able to allow people to understand how I got to that point, right?
Yeah.
And I think that, willingly giving that, and they call it the altruistic way, right? Giving it away for fun and for free is what helps me stay on the balance. And if there is a karma, and karma does exist, I feel like that's the concept behind which it was implemented, right?
Right.
So to kind of get into your question just a little bit, I don't know how I got started except for to say I was scared to death. Right. I was fearful. I was one of these people that I couldn't stand the sound of my own voice. All of my ideas were both great and horrible at the same time.
Yeah.
I would get to this precipice where I'd say, I think I can do this thing, and then I'd have this voice. I like to call it this internal committee in my brain. And depending on who's got the microphone, it depends on how my mood is that day. And what I found was, I just had to tell the guy that told me I couldn't do things to put down the microphone and give it to the guy that could. And that's kind of how this project was born.
Oh, that's beautifully said. And I want to piggyback off of that, right? Because I think oftentimes people often say sometimes the most magical moments happen when it's not planned, right? And I think if you take too much time trying to plan it, it's going to take too long for it to get off the ground, because nothing is ever going to be perfect.
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a few things. This is a deep answer, and for me, it comes down to if we were to boil it down to the bones, right? It's just that life's not all about me, man. And I guess let's look at the word trauma, right? And trauma can come in a lot of different forms. You may have experienced trauma in one way, and I experienced trauma a different way as far as situationally. However, as human beings, our physical and chemical makeup experiences trauma the same, no matter if it's to the extreme of seeing someone, pass away in front of you, or somebody just beat you with a belt one time too many. Trauma still experiences itself in the same way. So with that being said, no matter if you're addict, alcoholic, normal person, overeater, whatever it is, every person walking on this earth, if you're watching this, listening to this, if you can comprehend, the language that I'm speaking or not, you've experienced trauma. I'm sorry to tell you that. And if you feel like you haven't, maybe you need to do a little trauma work, because most people have experienced trauma to some degree. So with that being said, to go a little deeper, my past is my greatest asset to be able to help people. Right. Well, why is helping people such a big thing for me? It's my purpose. Right. And I'm fond of saying there's a quote that it just popped in my head one day, and it said, God will never give you passion for something he doesn't want you to use for your purpose. So for me, I'm passionate about helping people. So what other thing is there for me to point my purpose toward except for helping people? When I can share what happened to me openly, somebody listening to this today will be empowered to share what's happened to them openly. Secrets, we all have secrets. We love our little secrets, right? And
Yeah.
you know, we have our little secrets, and but they fester, man. They fester and they get spoiled in the dark, and it rottens the soul. You know, really, it really just, you know, rots out the soul, and we end up having this soul sickness or this spiritual sickness, and we can't understand why our lives won't turn around, and why we can't achieve this or get to that point, or just, for me, just get to sheer contentment, you know.
Yeah.
And sharing my experience allows someone to be able to find hope.
Yeah.
So
Let me ask you this as a follow up. Do you think, because oftentimes sharing can either be a therapeutic experience for someone, or it can be something that maybe opens the floodgates and it causes a little more panic and stuff? For you, is sharing your journey, your background, is this something for you that is also kind of like a therapy, like it's healing you being able to speak? Because one of the things I've learned is that when people don't have other people or a way to share their pain, that pain just festers in. So is
mhm.
this kind of like a therapy for you?
It can be, I guess. I mean, it can be, for sure. So I like what you talked about with, you know, when you look at people and they don't have other people to talk to, right? And the history of our human experience, you know, let's go back 100,000 years. We're developed in a sense to where we crave community. If you look at our ancestors, no matter where you may have came from, you'll see that at some point we were all community animals, right? We walked around in packs. We were uh, we were a herd. And I like that you brought up community, because you mentioned that, you know, sometimes people have a hard time sharing these things, or they don't have people to share them with, right? So I want to touch out, like, first of all, if you look at the entirety of the human history, right, like when humans were on Earth, and let's just say we went back 100,000 years, we were community animals. We were pack animals. We traveled the world in a pack. And something that's gotten missing, I think, at least when I look around, is that community spirit, right? So um, it's always been important to have a community of people around you that you can, you know, get this stuff out to, whether it was a bunch of grunts and groans or whether it was elaborated through, you know, eloquent speech. Either way, this stuff will fester inside. To kind of go deeper into your question, though, like, for me, it is therapeutic, right? For me, it is one of those things that is, it gives me purpose, and I don't share it for shock value. I don't share, and I share it when it's appropriate, right? Like, if you were to listen to back to the old podcast that we've done, in the vein of helping people that were addicts and alcoholics, you're going to hear some gnarly stuff coming out of my mouth. The Shuman Show, in and of itself, going back to that again, bringing that back full circle, that's a representation of the fact that I'm not only a recovered alcoholic, I'm also another thing, right? I'm a screenwriter, I'm a producer, I'm a radio host. So I have so much more to offer the world. With that being said, um, sharing things is uncomfortable, right? So if someone's listening to this, and sharing things is uncomfortable, and it can cause anxiety, it can cause panic, it can, you know, lead you down a path where, if you're not careful, or if you're not doing it with someone that's been down that road before, where you get into morbid reflection of your past, you know, if it's something, you know, horrible. So I don't recommend doing it alone. I don't recommend just sitting in a room, like, and just, you know, hashing this stuff out. I recommend having someone that has an ability to navigate trauma, right?
Mhm.
But with that being said, my own experience has been that every time I was faced with the door of discomfort, if I could just walk through it, all of the best blessings were on the other side of that doorway. So, like, it's just this thing. When we're growing up, as a young man, when I was growing up specifically, people said, "Oh, well, you're having growing pain." I'm 6'3", 280, you know, and I was 6'3", 280 in high school, and I think in middle school I was like, you know, 5'9", 240. You know, I wasn't that big, but I was like 5'9", though. You know, I had this big growth spurt that occurred between middle school and high school. And when that happens, it can be painful,
Yeah.
right? It can be very painful, but there's a reason why they call it growing pain, right? It's
Yeah.
not meant to be comfortable. So if something's going on with you and you're struggling with something, man, I recommend definitely get the help you need, talk it out, let people know what's going on, and um, you know, be that light for somebody else.
Yeah, it's funny when you mentioned when you was a kid, you was 5'9", 280. For a second, I was thinking you was the kid from Matilda eating the chocolate cake.
Yeah,
But
right. I wanted to be. I wanted to
yeah,
be.
I think we all have. I'm still like that. Come on, man. Life is
Yeah.
short. But let me ask you, when we're talking about trauma, overcoming things, these are, I've noticed since the pandemic, these type of nuanced conversations have done well, because I do think now we're seeing more spaces of people addressing that. So, your show is very important in that aspect. I do a serviceable job on that. A lot of times we're
Mhm.
laughing and joking and stuff, but I think these type of conversations make a difference, right? And so for you, how do you stay motivated through all of the stuff that you've been through? Like, how do you find the strength to continue on different avenues and making ways to make yourself useful? Because oftentimes a lot of people, that trauma becomes like a weight on their shoulder, but for
Mhm.
you it seems like something that you're happily, like Santa Claus with the bag on his back, you're holding it and you're walking through. How did you get to that point? How long did it take you to get to that point?
Well, as far as how long it takes what it takes, right? There's this beautiful thing where once we start moving forward, we're no longer moving backwards, right? And you can only move one way or the other. You either going forward or you're going backward. You're either living or you're dying. Which one you want to get busy with? And as long as you're making, I like this thought too, right? And I'll just share this with you. And this is in regard to progress, right? Because a lot of times we do want to see a time frame. I want to know when I'm going to be better. I want to know when I'm going to have the money. I want to know when I'm going to have the girl, the car, the blah 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 blah. And what that is that's really just insistence, right? Like I have an insistence. I'm going to put out these good things into the universe, and then I'm going to insist that they should come to me in this way, this fashion, this speed, blah blah blah. Well, insistence equals resistance when it comes to matters of the universe, and at least that's been my experience. And um, kind of go back and swing around just a little bit. It takes what it takes. Okay, so 1% better, right? 1% doesn't seem like a lot. And if we broke down $1 bill into 1% and you see a penny laying on the ground, which is 1% of a dollar, most times people walk over it these days, right? But 1% better every day, 100 days in a row is 100% better than where you started. And I think that's one of the things that gets overlooked. So just if you just get started, the rest will follow. And then secondly, like it comes easy because I'm healed, man. Like this stuff doesn't have sway over me anymore. And I can't really explain that for me personally. And I'm a spiritual guy, not a religious guy. For me personally, it's the work of a miracle through God for me. Whatever that looks like, you can call it the universe, spirit of the universe, nature. I don't care what you call it, but it's something other than me that helped me get there. Another thing too, and this kind of goes into the screenwriting is stories, right? Like sharing aspects. Every story I write, Percy, has got a piece of me in it. Every time I write a story, a narrative, a TV show, a film, whatever the case may be, a piece of Kris ends up in there. And I think that that's beautiful. It never happens intentionally either. It's just one of those things is as I'm writing I like writing gritty, flawed characters that have enormous redemption arcs and through their journeys. And it's really weird that the redemption arc usually in some way, shape, or form has some aspect of my own redemption laced in. And I think that that's also cathartic in its own right.
Yeah.
Um, does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. It's perfect. And that was actually a great segue into screenwriting, because I was going to ask you about that. I think one of the things I've learned, um, not that I've lived long enough yet, but watching stories and doing my own research, I've noticed a lot of successful people, whether it's comedians, actors, screenwriters, producers.
Hmm.
One of the things they always talk about is no matter what you do, you have to at least at some point bring a piece of you to whatever you're doing. So
Hmm.
when it's acting, whatever, I use acting as an example because that's what I do. It's kind of like you have a character. Maybe this character is the scum of the earth, but maybe this a part of his backstory that you can relate to. So you extract some of that humanity from yourself and put it into the role. So for you, screenwriting, Uh, let's talk about that because one of the things that kind of came to my mind, even though he's not really a screenwriter, is Ray Romano. Because I know when he
Mhm.
did Everybody Loves Raymond, he talked about how a lot of the dynamics in that show was from his own family. So for you, when you're screenwriting, um, what is that process like for you? Is it a lot of like just going over, revising, or maybe using some of your past to kind of infiltrate, or maybe even your connections with people to kind of help you in that process?
Yeah. So, um, let me just point this out too, real quick before we get going, because I wish somebody would have said this to me. Stories, telling a story, sitting down, one human to another, telling a story, typically easy. Writing screenplays is freaking hard. Okay.
Yeah,
For me, it's hard. It's not coming up with the story that's difficult. It's making sure that the screenplay is doing what the story entails, right? Like what the story deserves, because we all have a story.
yeah,
And kind of going back to Ray Romano, right? Like life is the ultimate comedy and drama. Like real life is the ultimate comedy and drama. I used to think about how my life might be, and I've always liked film and TV. And I used to get super frustrated because I was like, these shows, this thing, this film, whatever, is showing excerpts of how great it is, and or maybe even a couple of moments of how bad it is. But ultimately, within an hour and a half, it's all wrapped up nice and neat, and the guy gets what he wants, right? Whereas me, on the other hand, I've been wanting and striving and fighting for this thing for years, and like I just want to live life through excerpts, and it
yeah,
just doesn't work that way. But pulling from those real life experiences is I mean, that's just gold, right? Like it's actually like mining gold. Now, some people argue about it one way or the other, that whether there's a story in life or not. I think just about every person, everything has a story, and I got that from my grandmother. She was the family storyteller, if you will. And if you trace back, going back into human lineage again, we're storytelling animals. Like our sociology, our ability to connect with other people. There's a whole branch of anthropology that goes through lore and folklore and storytelling. So the fact that the family dinner table used to be the center point of the home, where people would get together and tell stories about their day, speaks a lot to the importance of stories in human society, right? And it's something that we're losing. It is something that I think humans in general are losing. But to take that and to be able to portray it into a place that's entertaining, it's a little more difficult than just sitting down at a keyboard, which is what I thought it would be. Because I wrote 4 novels by hand, and I never did anything with them. I just wanted to write. It was cathartic for me to just sit down and do that. And um, I said to myself when I got started screenwriting, I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to do novels. These are hard. They
right.
take forever. I got to do several versions of two to 300 pages to try to get it tight. And I'm going to do the screenwriting. This is my own thinking, my narrative. I'm going to go into screenwriting because that'd be easy. It's only 120 pages. Uh, as it turns out, the less pages that you have, the less elaboration you can go into, and you have to get far more descriptive in a shorter space. So it is more difficult in that sense to me. To me, however, it's so much more rewarding because it really pushes the limits of what I thought I was capable of, and it
Right.
gets me into a place to where, um, I have this duality. I have this thing to where I can be an egomaniac with an inferiority complex, even to myself. And I can type away at the keyboard and read it back and say, "This is the best thing since Ernest Hemingway, wrote For Whom the Bell Tolls." And I can read it and think it's amazing, and then I'll read it the next day and say, "This is shit," and just want to delete it. And it doesn't happen all the time, but it's definitely something that I go through. And
Yeah.
what I've learned is writing's taught me patience. Writing's taught me process. Writing's taught me progress, not perfection. And a lot of these things, I try to carry with me in everyday life. So, um, that said, man, I absolutely love writing. It was my dream career, even though I didn't know it was. Uh, and I'm super stoked that I got involved with that. As far as the connections, I just reach out, man. I'm a connection guy. I'm the guy that if I see you standing in line in front of me at the coffee shop and I like your shoes, I'm going to say, "Hey, man, I love those shoes." And we're just going to start rapping, and we're going to end up, getting to know each other. And that's who I am. And I come from a sales background too. And that probably doesn't hurt, that I just learned that I can be comfortable talking to anybody, even if I feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I hope that answers your question.
Oh, you did perfectly. And I think the part you mentioned about, you know, if you're in a coffee shop, the customer in front of you have nice shoes, you compliment them. That's one of the key things about being creative, is that sometimes the most obscure thing can, you know, light a spark in your mind, or that creative juice in you, right? And you know, uh, it's funny enough that you mentioned, we're talking about screenwriting, because I remember when I was in high school, I remember I wrote like this 50-page superhero novel.
Yeah.
Um, and I remember that took me like 3, 4, 5, 6 months to write.
Yeah.
Now we're talking about, when you're screenwriting, talking about films, TV, you're talking, you know, that's like 3 times that, you know, a lot of pages, a lot of writing. And like you said, it's different when you're just writing for, let's say you was writing a scene for me.
Hmm.
Now, let's say you have, you know, 5 million people on cable TV, you have to, you know, entertain. How do you do that? You have to extract different elements to do that writing. So let me ask you about that. You know, screenwriting, I think for me, being an actor, I always appreciate the people behind the scenes, because they do a thankless job. You know, they think, you know,
Hmm.
when you think of actor, you think of me, you know, Jason Momoa, who stole my role. You know, but anyway, you know, I digress. But you always think, people always think about the actors. They don't think about the screenwriters, the directors that often, unless they're famous. Screenwriting for you is I know screenwriting is a lot of work. It's a tedious process. For you, what is that process like for you? Is it kind of like, you know, I hear stories of people saying, I strap myself in a room, in the hotel room, I won't leave for the weekend until we get this done, or you
Hmm.
know, I need to get out, talk to people, and find different elements to kind of bring the piece together. What is your process?
Yeah, I think that's a great question too, because I think the chapter of my life right now is balance, and that's the chapter that we're in. And with that being said, I wasn't always a goal oriented person or intention setting type person, but you know, more recently in the last year or so, I've been really big on setting intentions, and instead of looking at the results of the intentions, I look at the actions to get there. Right, so I look at it as a mathematical equation. I'll explain if you don't mind. So
Absolutely.
A is a situation. B is going to be my reaction or response, and then C will be my result. Okay. So A plus B equals C. Situation plus response equals result. Okay. What I've been noticing lately, and this goes for, you know, not necessarily only men, but a lot of men do this, right? Which is why I've been developing a playbook for men through the Shuman Show also. um, a lot of men will look at the results and say, I'm not getting the results that I want in my life. I should change the situation. So instead of, you know, looking at the response or the action behind it, I'll say, well, you know, I'm not getting enough money in Orange County, so I'm going to move to Los Angeles County. Right. And they
Right.
think if they can change the situation, they'll change the result. Well, newsflash, gentlemen and women, situations don't typically change, because you know what? Life be lifing, right? As they say,
Yeah.
you know, but what I found out is that God be Godding too, right?
Amen.
So, you know, the situation is going to stay the same. If I want to change the results, I really need to change my actions, right? When I focus on my actions, I get different results. Okay.
Yeah.
So, to answer your question, like I've been really intentional about the time that I set aside for the disciplines that I want to see happen in my life, right? So, I get up every morning about 5 o'clock. By 6, I've done all my prayer meditation, you know, all of my, you know, forward thinking about what life might look like throughout the course of the day and how I will show up in life if instead of being reactionary, to be responsive. Then I'll sit down on the computer and I write for hours, and I give myself a break here and there, and I go do another position where I work for a nonprofit that helps human trafficking victims throughout the day, and I take care of that. And then I come home and I focus on the Shuman Show. And I have myself blocked out in certain areas. I got a fiance, I got a couple of dogs. In a 12-step type program, I'm a mentor to other men. So I have to really, I like this expression, manage your calendar or other people will, and I manage my calendar. So that's kind of what my process looks like when it comes to actual storytelling. I'll give you an example as far as how the process looks for the creation of it, right? Have you ever heard of a thing called theta waves?
No, I don't think
Okay.
so.
So have you heard of Salvador Dali, the artist, the painter?
Yes.
He painted the I don't know if you know the name of it, but it's the painting with the trees on, like, it looks like a beach or desert, but it's got the melting clocks and all that stuff. So Salvador Dali was a big a big believer that all of the creation comes right at the moment, either before or right after or either right before we go to sleep or right after we wake up. So what he would do is he would hold a coin in his hand and he would sit in his favorite chair and he would doze off. And as he dozed off, he would drop the coin, he'd wake up and he'd start writing down notes about what he wanted to paint. And science now has discovered they call this theta waves, right? This is the moment when creation is really forming in the brain and you can like really manifest and blah, blah, blah. But one of my most passionate projects as of late that's really getting a lot of traction is a pilot for a series called What's Buried Beneath the Pines, which is, just to simplify it, Succession meets Ozark meets Yellowstone, right? So it's got that Southern Gothic vibe. And it's based around a $35 billion a year pine tree business in the state of Georgia, upon which I grew up, So that's a passionate project to me. It's gone through, I don't know, 9 or 10 revisions. So, here goes the hard work that I didn't think was going to exist. And I thought I was going to be able to really sit down and write one draft or maybe two, and I'd be done. No, I think I'm in my 9th or 10th revision right now. And it's on the desk of some people that really have the authority and power to get this on the screen. And I'm excited about that. And as we continue to go through the process, the quote unquote perfect script that I believe I have whenever we decide to move forward will change again. And I can't really get attached to anything, right? My intention is to be successful. Success looks different for everybody. Successful to me is to be able to tell the story I want to tell and be able to watch it with friends and family and to make my family proud and to be proud of myself. So I can't really put a lot of insistence on how that looks, right? So I don't get attached to it. I just put the intention out and I wait for the results to come however God wants to bring them to me.
Right. That's beautiful. I think it's fascinating that you do it by yourself. And that's something that you don't hear often. Most of the time when people think of screenwriters who are in the know, I should say rather, it's usually it's usually 2, 3, 4 people involved in that process. But for you, I want to ask you this, because even though screenwriting is different from acting, it's kind of the same.
Mm-hmm.
Rejection is part of the business.
Yes, it is.
And for you, when you're putting your heart, your soul into your writing, when you hear the producers and executives, the ones that have the power to change the direction, is it hard for you when you hear criticism about your baby? Because that's what it is. It's your work. Is that something that when you get to this level, you have to be understandable and flexible in that what you might come up with may not be suitable for everybody, and you might have to hear no, we want you to go back into the drawing board, redo this. How do you keep that professional, and how do you keep that checked, especially at this point in your career?
So I related to I went to culinary school years ago and I related to cooking. Okay. You don't do this stuff for other people, right? So in other words, if I cook a meal, and you may have been to most of us have been to a high-end restaurant at least once, and you go in and they got the pre-feed meal, and you go in there and you order the 5-course thing, and that's what they have. If you don't want that, you don't go to that restaurant, right? And that chef, I guarantee he didn't cook it for you specifically. He cooked the meal he wanted to cook, and that's what you're going to eat if you want to eat it. And it's kind of the same thing with writing. I'm writing this thing because I think it's enjoyable and I like it. And I'll never turn in a piece of product that I don't feel is 100% to my best capability as of that moment. If you don't like it, then it wasn't for you, right? And that's okay. You can't make everybody happy. He who tries to please everyone pleases no one, right? So I do it for myself. I enjoy the process. And of course, rejection is part of it, right? And usually I'm no different than you or anybody else listening to this. We all want to be loved. We all want validation. That's a human trait. We all want to know that we've done good. So if I see an email that, like maybe there's a manager or a producer or somebody that's on my wish list, I want to work with this person so bad, right? And I see an email back from them, they're like, yeah, it didn't pique my interest, I do what everybody else does. I read the email, I go pout and say, I'm never doing this shit again. And then finally I just pick myself up and say, you know what? It's okay. It wasn't for them. And maybe the next project will be, but yeah, it's just, you just roll on, man. It's water off a duck's back, as they say.
Yeah. But how long did it take you to get to that point, right? Because even for me in my journey, it took about, I would say about 9, 10 years for me to finally get comfortable with the no's.
Mhm.
How long did it take for you to get comfortable in that mindset?
I had the added benefit that I was in a sales background. I brought it up briefly earlier. One of the things I learned in a sales background is the rule of 10. Okay. And I'll share this with you if you don't mind. So the rule of 10 says that if I go and talk to 10 people, doors, right? I go knock on 10 different doors. One out of every 10, AKA 10%, will purchase what I'm selling, whatever that is. That doesn't mean that it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, buy. 1, 2, 3, 4. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
The way it works is I might get 90 no's and then 10 yeses back to back, right? Or I might get 900 no's and then 100 yeses, right? And obviously that's an extreme example. You're probably not going to get 100 yeses, but overall, the goal is I'll give you this example. I pitched a project yesterday, okay, and I sent it out to 30 people. 30 different producers, managers, et cetera, throughout the industry. And right now I'm on a 10% streak. Like initially I got 12 no's. Since then it's averaged out to 10%. And so it's that knowing that everything's aligning exactly how it should be. That 10% rule, it just makes you feel real good and it makes you kind of keep going, but at the end of the day, faith in the universe and faith that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. And that I have this expression that I share with the guys that I mentor. And I say, if God wants it to happen, bro, you can't mess it up. And if he doesn't want it to happen, there's nothing you can do to make it right. So that's kind of, I lean into my faith.
Oh, I love that. That was a nice way of summing it up. It is definitely something that takes a long time to kind of get your head wrapped around. It's not easy. And there's people who've, actors and screenwriters who's been in the industry 30, 40 years who's still going through that struggle
Yeah.
of I'm not good enough, which is weird when you consider a lot of these people are majoring in movies, they're writing for major movies and directors. For you though, let me ask you, is there any screenwriters or producers or directors you want to work with in the future?
Man, I'd be crazy if I didn't say Christopher Nolan, right?
No.
Like, I love that guy. Everything he stands for, his ability to get inside of the world. Um, so, like I said, I like to develop deeply complex and deeply flawed characters, and I like to build an immersive atmosphere for them to play in. Okay, and I use the term "play" loosely because it's not always fun for them, right? Um, but I enjoy doing that. I like to build my favorite projects involve a world where the setting is as much a character as the characters. And it's almost like quicksand, where the closer they get into the setting, the further they're pulled into it. And as myself as an audience member, or either as a reader, the deeper I get into it, the more I feel immersed in that. Right.
Yeah.
And I think Christopher Nolan does that so well. And definitely him, Quentin Tarantino, without a doubt. I
Oh,
mean, it's all the A game guys, right?
yeah.
Um, these guys are just awesome
Yeah.
storytellers.
Yeah, I always find it fascinating when they this question, right? Because every director, every screenwriter, every actor, everybody has a different process, and it's funny that even some of the most well-respected actors don't get along with certain directors just because these styles clash. So you something up perfectly. So let's have a little fun, right? Let's do a little
Mhm.
game because I find these type of just fun interactive things to put you on the spot, right? So let's have some
Okay.
fun. So I have a list of famous directors, right? And I know you're a
Okay.
screenwriter, but I do think every screenwriter needs a great director and producer to come along and help them on the process, right? So you mentioned a few names. So I'm gonna give you two names and you just choose which one you think suits you. All right, you ready to
Okay.
roll?
Let's
All right.
do it.
Steven Spielberg or Tim Burton?
Spielberg.
Spielberg. All right. James Cameron or Ridley Scott?
Scott.
Hmm. George Lucas or Spike Lee?
George Lucas.
George Lucas. George Lucas or Martin Scorsese?
Ooh, Scorsese.
Scorsese. Okay. All right. All right. You know what? Let's do this. Martin Scorsese. No, no. I got to do someone big blockbusters. Quentin Tarantino or Christopher Nolan?
Ooh, that's. That hurts. That's painful, right? But I'm going to have to go with Nolan.
Nolan.
Yeah, I mean, like
Look,
Chris, like we got that thing going.
yeah. I have to put in my mind, I have to think if I'm going to put two directors up, they kind of have to have a similar style. But I
Yeah.
don't know all of them firsthand. So let's keep rocking and rolling. Let's keep doing this. All right.
Okay, let's go.
So let's do Francis Ford Coppola or David Fincher.
That's a good one. Fincher.
Fincher. Let's do Peter Jackson or Ron Howard.
Ron Howard.
Oh, this is a good one. You'll
Okay.
love this one. Roman Polanski or Woody Allen.
Polanski.
J.J. Abrams or Bryan Singer.
Just from a storytelling perspective, J.J. Abrams.
Yeah, he's a fire choice.
Yeah.
Now I gotta put this the Giants, Zack Snyder or James Gunn.
That's kind of I you know what? I'm so inauthentic right now. I thought about it for a second, but I really didn't. I went straight to James Gunn.
Oh, I mean, you're not at fault. They're both wonderful in their own right. That's a hard choice.
Yeah, it is. It
is. Wes Craven or Clint Eastwood?
Eastwood. So there was this movie, and of course, this is before he was a director. But my grandparents, big Western fans, John Wayne, Bonanza, the whole 9 yards, and they grew up in that time. But they had a movie on VHS back in the day, and I'm aging myself there alone. But he had a movie called Hang 'Em High, and we used to watch that movie over and over. And I'm a fan of westerns, but more importantly, from just the perspective of what kind of stories I like to tell, Eastwood tells these deeply flawed characters in these deeply emotional settings. And I would love it. Yeah, to have a chance to work with him would be amazing. Like $1 Million Baby, The Mule, stuff like that.
Yeah, Clint Eastwood is someone I didn't even know he was a real major play in directing until recently. When you think of major directors, you think of the Scorseses, the Nolan, the James Gunns, the Zack Snyders. If you can have a choice, if you had top 3 choices of directors you can work with, who would you choose?
Nolan, Tarantino, and Eastwood.
Oof, that's a powerhouse line.
Yeah, that's a big one.
now, here's a follow-up though. Out of all 3 you just mentioned, who do you think you feel like you can work with and blend with better?
Clint Eastwood. I feel like we'd be like boys back in the day.
My Clint Eastwood is what is he now? He hasn't been in his 80s.
I don't know. Yeah, he's up there, man, for sure.
Man,
but he's still doing his thing though. He just made Juror number 2.
Really? All right, so let's do this. Let's do one more segment. Let's do this because in order to have a film, we have the screenwriter, we have the directors. Now we gotta go with actors.
Right, okay.
Let's do this.
Okay, then.
Now, this one I don't need no script for because I already know. All right. So we got George Clooney or Brad.
That's a good one because I'll probably go with
Pitt. Denzel Washington or Will Smith?
Denzel.
My favorite actor of all time, easily.
Yeah.
Let's do Angelina Jolie or Viola Davis.
Viola Davis.
Okay.
She's beautiful. I mean, she's a talent. She's super talented.
Oh, underrated, superly underrated. Hey. Actually, scratch all that. Percy Brown or Jason Momoa?
Percy Brown.
No, that's what I'm talking about.
All day.
James Gunn. You heard it out his mouth. Let's go.
That's right.
Oh man, it's I think conversations like these, right? We can have fun and laugh and joke around, but I think conversations like these are important, right? Because not only are we having fun and we're talking about a lot of different things, but I think it's a testament to overcoming, right? And I think you are someone who is proof that you can bounce back from rock bottom and climb to the top. And I think stories like these are what made this podcast to me such an important thing, because despite all the celebrity actors or people who are winning awards in the entertainment industry, I think the nitty gritty conversations are important. And I think
Hmm.
your story is one of a kind. And I think that you have shown that you don't let your past define you, but you do use your past to help you guide you to the future. Is that right for me to say?
100%, man. And while you were saying that, I was thinking about this, right? That word define. And as a writer, I like words, right? So that kind of, define, definition, and how many people can really say what defines them, right? Like, what is our definition of who we are? And some people think, well, I know who I am, but in reality, they're just exhibiting traits that were passed down to them from other sick humans, our parents or their parents' parents or whatever. And we're defined by those things, even if it's subconsciously and we don't understand that that's what's going on. So for me, I think the biggest thing and the biggest takeaway in that regard is to get rid of all the definitions, right? Because as long as I hone in on certain keywords, or I'm this or I'm that, or, it's easy to say, that I'm my titles, right? That I'm a screenwriter, I'm a fiance, I'm a this, I'm a that. When you strip all that away, though, what are you left with? And this is a good contemplation question when you're sitting alone. And I mentioned it briefly, and thank you for pointing out everything today, man. You've been a super gracious host. And with the Shuman Show, we've developed this thing. It's called a check yourself playbook, right? And it's a 90-day cycle to success, a journey to pathway to success. And so if you're one of those kind of people, and right now the men's version will be out on Amazon pretty soon. And if you're one of these kind of people that is, constantly hitting your head against the ceiling and then falling back to the ground and wondering why you can't level up to that next level, well, this journal is made for people like that, and it's made for those people that just keep going. And I jokingly always say that, everybody's looking around to see if their ducks are in a row and find out they're geese all along, or they're pigeons.
Yeah.
um, it's just one of those things that helps us develop habits that successful people exhibit on a day-to-day basis. So that's having to do with the Schumann Show. And um, you know, the screenwriting thing is going crazy, man. The Schumann Show will be out the end of this month, coincidentally, and I look forward to talking to you on that as well. Whenever we can match it up, because
Yeah.
I got to have the infamous Percy Brown come hang out. We talk about how he beat out Jason Momoa for a role, and yeah, man, like life is in session, man, and I'm such a grateful participant.
Yeah, beautifully said. You wrapped it up nicely. I think story. Like I said, I think what you're doing is a testament, right? And I think it can be understated how important it is for stories like yours and the Schumann Show, and what it magnifies, right? Because too often in society, right, we laugh, we joke, we get distracted, but sometimes we have to face real life. And I think conversations like this help kind of balance the fun, but also life be life,
Yeah.
like you said. And I think what you said at the end is beautiful. I'm not going to ruin it by speaking and using my charisma to try to overturn it. But uh, what you got going on? We just started 2025. 2024 was a great year, but I
Hmm.
know this is going to be a better year. So for you, do you have any goals in mind? Do you have anything coming up that you want to share?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, the Schumann Show will be out at the end of this month. We have some amazing and intriguing guests that are going to be on there. Very interesting people, talking about interesting things for interesting people, and we're going to be out by the end of this month on all streaming platforms. You can find us anywhere, just like Percy. You can look us up, find us, and it might be even something that we can work out to where if you follow both the Prince of Fresh Air and the Schumann Show at the same time, I'll give you a kickback on the playbook if you're trying to get your life in order.
Yeah.
I want to build us up, man. Um, like I said, I really can't talk too much about the production stuff right now because it is kind of under wraps while we're, waiting to see who's going to be attached to it. But there are some cool emails that are coming through. And every time I get one of these cool emails, man, my smile just beams. And I'm like, I can't believe I'm living this life, man. I have it way better than I ever thought I would. And if I got what I deserved, I wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
So we got that going on. The journal, of course, the playbook. Other than that, man, like I'm sitting back. My goals for this year. Every other year I've ever set goals, I usually focus on what the result I'd like to see by the end of the year. This year, I rephrased it just because I'm a word guy. I rephrased it to intentions, and then instead of just listing the intention of what I'd like to see life look like at the end of the year, I listed out actionable things that I could do. So, one of those is to commit to at least 20 minutes of writing every single day. Something to do with writing to get some physical exercise every single day. And not really focus on the result, right? Because as I said, if I can consistently put together action, the results will be there.
Amen. That's beautiful. God is good, like you said. And I don't usually get into religion on it because everybody got their own religious beliefs and stuff. But yeah, I'm one of those people who found religion over the last 4 years, which is weird because I would go to church all the time as a kid.
Yeah.
But for me, I really, when my brother passed away in 2020, excuse me,
Mhm.
it was definitely something that made me realize life is short. You got
Yeah,
to
it
take
is.
advantage of every opportunity. And so, Chris, I know you said when you see certain names lined up on the email, the smile pops up. But
Yeah.
when you see the most charismatic man, it always lights up.
That's it. That's it. And this just so I can kind of like, and this is not a skirting of anything, right? This is just a clarification because there are people that struggle with that G word, right? That uppercase G word. People struggle with it, man. And I
Yeah.
get it. Like I get it. I hated God. I resented God. When I say the word God, I don't imply anything specific, right? I use it as a term of convenience. I'm not a Christian. I'm not a Buddhist. I'm not a Hindu. I don't practice in any religion. For me, I practice in spiritual principles, right? So honesty, open-mindedness, willingness, brotherly love, non-judgment. These are principles. And the difference for that, for me, right? And if you can take something from this, great. And if you don't, that's okay too. Religion is man-made. Spirituality is God-given, right? And so with that being said, I can go to church in the woods. I can go sit down. I got a creek down behind my house. I'll go back there and sit on a log and watch my dogs play. And that's about as good as God as I can get.
Yeah.
And I enjoy that, and it keeps me at peace. And for me personally, whatever brings me peace without harming me is God. And I'll
Oh,
leave it at that.
yeah, that I love that summary. I think that was the perfect way to kind of sum it up because oftentimes when people hear that G word, they think of a certain religion, but like you said, it can mean multiple things to different people. It doesn't
Hmm.
always have to be specific to something. But
Yeah. Who am
I,
I? Who am I? Who am I to
yeah,
say you're wrong and I'm right? That's not spirituality. That's not God.
Chris, it's been an amazing conversation. This is one of those episodes where I'm always shocked by because you go into it one way, but you come out a different way. And your story, your experiences, and your success is one to be commended. Even though Harvey Levin from TMZ is messing with the internet connection, he can't stop this train. I'm the
Yeah.
most charismatic man. That's Kris Shuman. We're here rocking and rolling. I'm gonna give you the floor, give you the last words. Chris, anything you want to say before we head out?
No, man, I really just want to say, like, first of all, Percy, thank you for having me. Excuse me. Thank you for having me on the show, man. It was a great time getting a chance to talk to you and get to know more about who you are as a person. And the most charismatic man, it sticks, man. Like I'm going to remember that tonight whenever I go to bed, not in a weird way. It's great.
No
Um,
Diddy, right?
yeah. I do want to point out, like, you know, be kind to yourself. If you're listening to this and you're going through something, or maybe your goals aren't happening as quickly as you hope they would, or life is lifing, be kind to yourself, and just remember, like, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step. We
Yeah.
can't make that at one time. So just as long as your feet move forward a little bit, excuse me, you're making progress, man. And that's all that can be expected of you. And, if anyone out there ever needs anybody to talk to, you mentioned earlier, people have a hard time finding people to talk to. You can certainly reach out to me on social media, the Kris Shuman on Instagram. Send me a message, man. I got an open ear. I'm a good listener, or so I've been told. A fun fact, by the way, Percy, did you know, and this is probably why you're so good at what you do, and while I'm good at what I do, that 90% of communication is listening. 90%
Absolutely.
of communication is listening. So it's counterintuitive, right? But my grandma, my sweet little grandma, before she passed away, she used to say, that's why God gave you one mouth and 2 ears, so you listen twice as much as you talk. So yeah, man, I appreciate you having me on and the opportunity to talk about my story. And if you need anything moving forward, this is publicly known now. I'm offering my services in any way that I can help add value to what you got going on, Percy. I
Yeah,
appreciate you.
absolutely. Likewise. And you hit it right on the head. I always say a helping hand is a better hand. But I think a
That's it.
better way to say it is we have one mouth, 2 ears. Use those 2 ears. Listen to the podcast. Listen to the
That's
Shuman
it.
Show. Enjoy life. Again, thoughts and prayers go out to everyone in LA. Let's hope for
Tragic.
a strong recovery. People are able to bounce back. And thank you to the first responders, everybody out there who risking their own lives in order to help others. That's what it's about. My time is up, but your time is now. We'll see you later.